This talk is going to be about testing on mobile devices using both browsers and mobile browsers to test your application. It's called Cover Your Web Mobile Applications with Integrations Test for Scratch. So it means that I will start with a simple application. I will go through steps, what needs to be done in order to make your application testable. My name is Karel Pivko. I work for Red Hat, for JBoss, doing QE there, focusing on Web Framework Kit effort, doing Arquillian and Arquillian Drone, Arquillian Android development in my free time. So, what's the story about today? Basically, you have an application and you want to be sure that if you make a single change to the application itself, it still works, which is kind of difficult because you know, these bugs are hiding everywhere, and you need a good tool set in order to discover them and destroy them. So that's behind the story. However, we in Arquillian team don't want you to learn a lot of new frameworks, right? You are already common with some of them. You use them on your everyday effort. So what we'd like to promote is to provide you an integration layers between various frameworks you are already using. So who's actually starting in the story? So, one of the most popular testing framework in Java, I guess, JUnit. How many of you don't know JUnit? Please hands up who doesn't know JUnit. Oh, great. So everybody knows JUnit. I don't to explain it much. It's basically a testing framework. It will be playing in this story. On the other hand, you can use TestNG as well. We have support for it. If you want it, go for it. The other thing here is Maven. A lot of Java applications these days are using Maven to as their build tool. So if you are already familiar with Maven, there is no reason why to stop using it, and you simply enhance your Maven build with specific dependencies. So one of the core technologies which will be shown in this demo is Selenium. How many of you don't know Selenium? Okay, so to give you an overview, Selenium is basically a framework to control your browser remotely. It means that it is able to open a browser and it is able to navigate through the page using different locators like IDs, CSS, jQuery, XPath, whatever. It means that you basically create a script in a such way that it will click through your web page. It will, for instance, fill a form, and it will send it to the server, and you will validate the output. So this is something you can do with Selenium. And Selenium, of course, supports a lot of browsers out there. So it's not limited to testing browsers on desktops like Firefox or Internet Explorer. It works for iOS or Android as well. Obviously, there are more browsers which are not in this slide, like HTMLUnit, which is very useful for headless testing. It supports Opera as well, so Chromium as well, so a lot of supported browsers here. So the first character from the story, which is really from the Arquillian stack, is the flying saucer in the middle of the screen. We call this stuff Arquillian Drone, and you can basically think of it like of a spaceship which basically brings your test to the browser. It is our integration layer between JUnit, Arquillian on the one side, and the browser itself on the other side. So it means that you don't have to specify where your browser is running, where how do you want to start it, where's the binary. It will basically prepare everything like that for you. The other character from Arquillian team is Ike. It's actually Arquillian itself. Do you guys know Arquillian from the previous talk here on the session? Arquillian is a testing framework. Basically, it allows you to get rid of mocking. You can test on real environments. It has a very large ecosystem at this moment. We support a lot of additional frameworks, like Drone being one of them, but we have an extensions, for instance, testing persistence layers easily. You can test some kind of frameworks out of the box, like Spring and so on. So what Arquillian does, it provides you an extension over JUnit in order to make your test simpler and much more powerful. Basically, it makes able to write integration tests in such way that they look like unit tests. And in the story, we have a few special guests. So these special guests are Shrink-Wrap and a test archive. Shrink-Wrap is a framework or tool coming from Arquillian family. Basically, it's a way how to create a Java, web, or enterprise, or whatever kind of archive directly in memory, so you don't have to dump it on the disk before you need to deploy it. It provides you a fluent API in order to build your application, and I will show you during the presentation how you actually use it to prepare a web application to be deployed and tested on the Android device. So that was a short overview of characters playing in the story. This is outline of today's presentation. I'll start with a step which is not really exactly related to testing on mobiles. However, it is quite important to get your Maven application in a good shape before you start testing, because it will simplify the usage of it and future changes. So that's the first step I'll be talking about. The next step I'll be talking about will be about using Arquillian. So I will show you how to actually include Arquillian in your Maven-based project. Then I'll show you how to package the application using Shrink-Wrap, how to actually use drone browsers like Selenium. And the next step will be about moving your application deployment in the cloud, so you will be able to test on a real mobile devices without trying to figure out how to configure network connection between your test and the mobile device. So to illustrate a bit of Maven, this is how Maven usually looks like. This is a dependency tree or dependency graph of one of the project. Arquillian is actually not really that much different. And the problem is that if you need to specify a dependency in your POM file, it often gets too much complicated. And that's basically the feeling you get when working with Maven a lot of time. So you basically want to avoid it. So how can you avoid having this feeling when working with Maven? Well, the first trick is about to use a property management. It means that you don't specify versions directly next to the dependency you are using to build your project, but you basically extract them to a specific section of a Maven POM file, and you keep them on a single place. There's another way how to reduce number of versions. That is, you find a BOM file. BOM file is basically a bill of materials, which means a file which contains a stack of dependencies combined together. So somebody else already tested the versions together, and you don't have to include the dependencies in the BOM file. You include the BOM file only, and it will manage the versions for you. So that will make your dependency management in Maven much simpler. One significant note: if you are including BOM files in your project, the order actually matters. The first comes, first wins. So it has some implications to be aware of. So this is actually how the dependency management in BOM file works. In your dependency management section, you include a dependency with scope import. You reference a version from the version property section you specified before, and this will manage the versions for you for free. That's not only the only step you can do in order to reduce some Maven dependencies. You can use something which is called a dependency chain, which basically works in order to reduce the dependencies which are actually used in your project. So it means that instead of specifying a list of single dependencies, you specify an entry point of a tree, and Maven will basically import whole tree inside of your project. Dependency chains are very useful. However, the difficult part is to figure out if there is such dependency chain. So you can use something which is managed externally for you. If not, you can create your own. This is how you actually use a dependency chain. So it's very similar to using a BOM file. Instead of it's not in dependency management section, it's directly in dependencies. And the other point here is that the dependency management mentioned in the BOM file works very well with dependency chains. That basically means that by including a dependency chain, which is in this case foo dep chain, which is having a transitive dependency on two artifacts, foo A and foo B, you basically get this version managed from a foo BOM file included in this section. So it might seem complicated. Let's jump to the example. I don't know how many of you had chance to see my Twitter message. Basically, I've published a demo application for today, made it online. So what we will actually do is I'll go through the application itself. It's on GitHub. If you want, you can grab it directly from this URL. That's actually exactly the thing I'm going to do at this moment. So let's create some directory. For instance, demo, and let's clone the application in there. So in order to make everything easier for you, you can have a look that there's a list of commits. There's a list of commits. You can go through each commit as a step. That's actually what I'll be doing in the presentation. So let's rewind the Git repository and let's start with the initial application. So I will import the application into Eclipse with JBoss tools. So let's import it. It's a Maven project, so it's quite simple to get it imported. Here it is. Here it is. So let's have a quick view how my application looked originally. So this is a POM file of my application, and you can have a look that every single dependency has actually its version specified right here. This is nothing you like. So I will move the application a bit forward. To let you see what I'm actually doing. So as a next step, I've moved the version properties into a single section, so now here I'm able to reference them. That helps, but it's not exactly the final state I want it to be. So as a next step, as you can see, I've reduced the number of versions I have to care about by introducing a dependency management BOM. By the way, that's something what we are doing here in JBoss, is to make this able for you. So this is something which we call JBoss Developer Framework BOM. You have a list of the other BOM files specified right there. So as you can see, my POM file is actually getting simpler. I managed to find out a different BOM file which I'll be using, which is an Hibernate BOM file. So now I have only 2 versions I have to care about. All the dependencies get their version management managed for free. So I simplified the Maven application a lot. So what's actually the next step in order to get your application enriched with Arquillian based test? This is use the very same concept in order to include the Arquillian dependencies. So surprisingly, the very first step I'll be doing in preparing my application to be testable is I will create a specific Maven profile which doesn't test anything at all. Which is really funny because it's about testing, and now I'm saying that by default I don't want to test anything. It's because you are creating an integration test. Sometimes it might happen that you want to build your application on an environment which, for instance, doesn't have access to browsers, you don't have access to Android emulator and so on. So it's quite a good convenience to have a profile like that and to use it. So let's start including Arquillian. In the very same way as I did for the simplification on the POM file, I figure out a version of Arquillian I want to use. In this case is 1.02 final. I include a dependency BOM which basically manages the Arquillian version, like all the components of Arquillian for me. And that's the only thing I have to add to my POM file. Well, actually not the only thing. Next I have to select what kind of testing framework I would like to use. So I'll be using JUnit, I'll be using bindings for container and JUnit. Arquillian allows you to test without using actual container, but if you want to test a web application, it makes perfect sense to use container. So that's actually a list of dependencies. You can go through the demo and see them on your own. The other step is including the flyer saucer inside of your application. So again, the very same way as I did for Arquillian and the other BOM files, I'm including the version into version management. I'm including the BOM file into dependency management. It gets my Maven BOM file in a much simpler shape. So let's move the application a bit. So let me follow the commit. So I've changed the POM file. Let me update the Maven configuration. Hopefully we will get rid of the bugs. There's some JavaScript validator running in there. Okay. Should not really matter. So this is my POM file. As you can see at this moment, I'm having 4 BOM files in here, and I've included. Didn't include it much at this moment. So I've included the only actual dependency, which is about using drone, which is right here. So this way I'm able to test my application. So how actually drone works? Basically it's a binding for Selenium. You have 2 versions of Selenium. The first one is default Selenium, which basically works as a proxy between the test and the browser itself. It's used JavaScript in order to control the browser. The Selenium 2, which is called WebDriver as well, is basically a newer version which works like an extension included inside of the browser itself, so it provides you much better control. as well as it provides you a better API, so it's type-safe API. For both versions, we do provide something which is called Arquillian Graphene, which is an extension project which allows you to work with Ajax and so on in a much more convenient way. So we give you possibility to move your old Selenium test, if you have any, to the Arquillian framework. If you want to develop new test, just jump into WebDriver and start with Graphene or plain old WebDriver. So this is how I include it. It's basically still the same, still a dependency chain. And let's prepare the application for some real testing. So what I'm doing here, I'm preparing another profile which will be used for test. This is not the default profile where the tests are skipped. So if you want to test your application on a container, you need to have a place where to deploy it. Arquillian supports plenty of containers. You can consider even, for instance, Weld standalone as a container. You have support for most common application server and web servers out there. So these are four most popular, I guess, application server out there at this moment. There's a concept of two different type of containers in Arquillian. One is called managed, which basically means that Arquillian takes care of the whole life cycle of your test. It means that it will start the application server for you, it will deploy the testing archive, it will run the tests, and then it will do a tear down. It will do everything like that for free without you to manage this on your own. So that's why it's called managed. The other way, how the other mode Arquillian is using for containers, it's called remotey. It differs because the container is already running and Arquillian is connecting to a remotey container. So does any of you want to answer the question, well, what's the advantage of remotey container, and on the other hand, what's the advantage of managed container when these two are compared together? Yeah, exactly. That's a good point. If you are using remotey, that's for basically debugging and developing your application, because you don't have to start container every time you want to test it. On the other hand, if you are running on a CI environment, it is much more convenient to use managed container because you don't want some external process to start the application server for you. So, yeah.
In a CI environment, like Hudson, where you might have multiple builds, projects at the same time, is there any sort of conflict between Arquillian starting up multiple server containers that are available?
Yeah, basically it depends on your configuration. By default, Arquillian is starting the container in such configuration as you configured it. So it means that you specify a port or it uses a default port. So if you are using the strategy one container per node, there's no conflict obviously, but Arquillian can start multiple containers, and it depends on the container itself how it manages the port configuration. So for instance, for AS7 we provide a single property which is able to do port offset. So you configure your second instance to be on a different offset, and here we go, there's no conflict between two containers. Arquillian itself doesn't care. It's not a tool to manage, to assign a random port to your container and so on. It basically depends, this part depends on you.
So if you are using one of those other managed containers,
yeah. Yeah, if you are using this on a single machine, then yes. Well, it will figure out that there's another container running on the same port, and it will refuse to start up, and the test will fail. So you will notice that very soon. It won't conflict with already running test, but it will make your currently running test fail. So again, I'm create a profile for the container, and okay, you've seen the image. I said that the usage of Arquillian should be much simpler. We are getting to the point that it might happen that you need to configure Arquillian as well. So the question is if you really need to. The answer is in most cases you don't actually need to. There are some sensible defaults. As you just pointed out, if you are using a single machine with different test runners, there might be an extra configuration. The good point is that all the configuration is done in a single XML file with an XSD, so it's quite simple to change it on a single place. And if you need to override something in the CI environment, you can do so simply by using a system property. How does it work with IDE? Yes, it works. Basically, the only thing you have to do is to use a best practice, that is to configure your Maven in such a way that it will filter the resources for you before the IDE sees them. This is something you can do in every IDE I'm aware of. So this is how Arquillian configuration looks like. I'm using drone in this very example. You can see there's an XML file. This is basically a browser properties capability. This is a place where I'm selecting which browser I'll be using. And in the Maven configuration, I move another property, which is called Firefox. Once I include the project into IDE, the browser capabilities property in a configuration from WebDrivers element will be replaced by the actual value specified in the profile, which is Firefox. And IDE will know that it should run against Firefox. Again, if I want to include support for a different browser, it's not really a rocket science. I only add a new Maven profile and I override the browser capabilities property. So once I select this particular profile, I'll get Chrome instead of Firefox. And the point is that you can select these profiles in a matrix on your CI environment. So on your developer machine, developing machine, you can execute only a single combination. On your CI, you can execute all the combinations all together. So this is basically the place where we are leaving Maven. We will be moving rather into Java code. So what's actually a testing archive in point of view of Arquillian? Is basically the set of dependencies or the part or piece of application you need in order to execute the test itself. So say that you are testing some EJB implementation, you include only these classes which are implementing that EJB, and you test it inside of a container. If you are testing the web application, you basically want to package whole application so you can deploy it on your application server, and it gets all the resources like HTML5, JavaScript, images, and so on. So this is the API Shrinkwraps provides for you. As you can see, that's an utility method, a factory method, which is called shrinkwrap create. I've created a web archive. I'm adding various classes here, like basically my model, domain object services, and so on. I'm also including resources like persistence configuration and as I said, JavaScript, images by the last call, where I'm doing that recursively to make it easier. It depends what kind of application are you actually building. If you are working with Java EE 6, you basically do not have to have a lot of dependencies not provided or by the application server on your class path. However, you might be using some external jars you need to package in your application. And now the question is, if you have a look at this call, how you want to include this jar file inside of this web archive. The idea is not to repeat yourself, so you already specified all these dependencies inside of your POM file, and what we, that's the example, like you have a dependency on common slang file. So you already specify this, and you don't want to repeat yourself in the test itself, because once you change your application, the test will fail because it contains something a bit different. So there's another tool to do that, which is called Shrink-wrap Maven Resolver, which you include in your project using the very same means, and you will get the dependencies from your POM file. So you basically select a POM file, you say, hey, I want a single group ID, artifact ID, and I want this as a file, and on the last line you include this as dependencies. That was almost that, except that here I had to include group ID and artifact ID. Here's a way how actually include all the dependencies which should be included on the class part of the application. So you import all defined dependencies, and you don't have to care anymore about changes in your POM file. So let's move to something more interesting, and that would be about using Arquillian drone. So I will rewind the application a bit. So I will refresh the project. So my project now contains all the modification I've explained, and let's move to a use case of drone usage. So this is how drone works internally. Basically, our test is running on a dedicated JVM. It communicates with the browser, which is a separate process as well, and there is your test application deployed on a test container, which is a third process. So there is kind of a lot of communications involved, and you can obviously let the browser run on a remote machine as well as the container itself. So it's not really required for these three processes to be running on a single machine. We will have an example of that later in the demo. Okay, finally we managed to see some test code. So this is basically a JUnit test. You can see it has a special runner which is called Arquillian. It has a method which is picked up automatically by Arquillian, which has an at deployment annotation, and it basically contains the var application built according to the previous slides. So if you run this JUnit test either from the CLI or from IDE, it will deploy the application on the server you configured. Depending on where your server is actually running, you will get a context path returned by another annotation. So if you change your server and it's running on a different port, it's running on a different machine, you don't have to change your test at all. Arquillian basically injects this kind of information directly into your test. Okay, you want to use Selenium, you inject this as well. Drone will take care of the setup, starting the browser, stopping the browsers. So let's run the test. So this is a drone-based test is doing everything I just explained. It's injecting a WebDriver instance, then it's injecting an URL, it's packaging the application, and the test itself actually goes through the page and it clicks on few elements and fills some information in there. So let me show you the application itself. So I'll start the application server. So I'll be using a remote mode in this example. I will bind it to a specific address. So here is my application server already running, and I will deploy the application to the running instance using a Maven command. As you can see here, as I specified a default profile, it won't test anything. So I got deployment really quickly there, and here it is, the context part of my application. Oh, HTML6 doesn't even exist, I guess. So, what was the actual URL? HTML5 demo app. So the other way around. So this is my testing application for this presentation. It contains a single form where you can register a new member. And it has a few modifications in order to look different, I mean to adapt to a mobile phones. So let's register a new member. You can see that you can add a new member here, and we'll do the same in our test. So this is the test itself. I will include a breakpoint right after the first element, and I will select the Maven profiles according to what I did during the previous slide. So I'll be using a remote container here, and I'll be using, for instance, Chromium driver. And directly from IDE, I will debug the test itself. It might take some time for the first time before the IDE itself builds the project. So let's wait a moment. What's actually going to happen on the background is that Arquillian or shrink wrap will package the application to a memory. Then it will use a protocol to deploy it to the existing running AS7 instance on my machine. It will return back the address where the application is actually deployed. Then drone will start a Chromium browser, and my test will pass the address, and that's it. For some reason it's not working. Oh yeah. So I have some JavaScript validation errors in there. So this is a browser. This browser was spawned by a drone, and you can see that if I let the window be always on top in this example, here's the breakpoint in the IDE. So far I filled only the first element, and I can easily debug my test. So here it is. I specified the email, and I can go on add a phone number. I can click on a register button. Here it is. My test actually passed. My application is working fine on a real environment. So that's quite nice, but what if I want to test in different browsers? Different browser, basically the only thing I need to do here is I select a different profile. Maven will rebuild my application. Meanwhile, I'll try to figure out where's that validation builder, and I will disable it, so I should get a clean build this time. Yeah, here it is. So now I can debug the very same test, and it will be using different browser. Yeah, this time it was much quicker. As you see, the workaround is quite nice. So now I'm not having Chromium, I'm having Firefox, and the very same way I can debug my test. So this is nice. This allows you to run your test inside of the IDE on your desktop, but it actually doesn't help you much if you want to test on mobiles. So how actually drone works internally? Drone has to determine what browser you want to test. Basically, it will use some heuristics to figure out what you actually want to inject. So based on a WebDriver type, based on the configuration, you can use qualifier as well. And the point here is that you keep a change on a single place. However, we want to give you flexibility to, for instance, run both both Firefox and Chromium in a single test. So you can have multiple drones. How it actually works, here's a very quick quiz. So you can assign the values from the left to the right. Drone annotation determines an injection point, and the field type determines the type of the browser. It's pretty easy if in case you are using something completely different to write an extension for drone, and it will inject your whatever driver as well. So if you are using something completely different than Selenium, you can inject it quite easily and profit from the rest of Arquillian infrastructure. So this is how it works. By default, it's using HTML unit. The old version, which is called default Selenium, which is Selenium 1, is using Firefox. And obviously, if you want an Android driver, you will get Android driver, right? I was speaking about having multiple browsers in a single test suite or test case. For that reason, we provide something which is inspired by CDI word, which is called qualifiers. By qualifiers, you can include instance of a very same type which has a different configuration. So here I have WebDriver, default driver, which will basically inject an HTML driver. The other drone WebDriver annotated with @Firefox14 will use my configuration element from Arquillian XML, and it will actually inject a Firefox 14 in my test. So this is a way how you can easily combine multiple browsers of the same field type into a single test. So we are moving slowly towards the possibility of testing on mobile devices like this one. However, there is one trick you have to be aware. If you are testing on a mobile device, the problem usually is that the mobile device and the machine where the tests are running are two completely separate devices, and you do not have a connection between them. I mean, if you manage to connect them into same network, they might see each other, right? But it's not usually the case. So you have a possibility to deploy your test on cloud instance, which means that you will get a public API for free, and then your mobile can connect to that public URL, and your test will get executed. So in order to do so, we will basically in the next step add a new container, which will be OpenShift. How many of you do know OpenShift? Okay, so that would be nice. OpenShift basically is a platform as a service provided for free from Red Hat. It allows you to run not only Java-based applications, but You can run PHP, Perl, Python there as well, Ruby on Rails, of course. And I will show you that this container has actually support for Arquillian out of the box, so it will be pretty easy to deploy the application right there instead of the locally running container. So, what's the trick about Arquillian and cloud containers? Basically, the cloud itself does not really differ from the container because it can the application deployed there can be started, or the container running there can be started, can be stopped. The cloud allows you to deploy application. It allows you to get the information about your deployment back to you, and as a platform, as a service, you can use it as a Arquillian container as well. So that's actually what we did with Arquillian OpenShift container. We provide a very lightweight Java binding on top of the OpenShift. So let me show you how OpenShift looks like. So this is an OpenShift instance running on OpenShift.com. I will connect to my account. And I will create a completely new application, or maybe I will remove the currently existing application and create a new space for testing. So this is basically a management console you get from there. I'll be removing the old application because the rest of my test is configured to work with this particular namespace, so it will be easier, but I will show you how to make it run with any kind of application namespace. So what you want to do here is an OpenShift. You want to create an application. You have a selection of various framework right here. So as I said, apart from AS7 or PHP, Python and so on, we also provide a support for enterprise application platform from JBoss, and you can obviously create your own cartridge. So it means that whatever is deployed here is controlled by you. So I will create a new AS71 cartridge. I will call my application a test app, and this is basically the public URL I'm going to get. So let's create an application. It will take a few seconds. Oh, maybe a few seconds are already over, so a bit more than a few seconds. What you actually get from OpenShift, you will get a Git repository, and whatever you push into Git repository will be automatically deployed. So if you want, you can have a look on this URL. You will see there is already something running in there. It's basically a template from my application. It's a template of AS7 cartridge, and it is the space where I will deploy my testing application. How I will do that? Here's a Git repository location, so I will basically reuse the information from this this web page in order to connect to OpenShift container. So let me again rewind the application a bit. Yeah. Okay. So I'll refresh the build. updating currently existing Maven configuration, and here it is. So here I can select another Maven profile. So instead of a remote container, I will select OpenShift container, and in Arquillian XML configuration I will basically include the information about the cartridge inside of the XML file. So let me copy paste the SSH name. The rest actually remains the same. So it will use an SSH ID stored in my disk in order to connect to a Git repository out there. The application packaged by the deployment method will be deployed right there, and the context URL will be returned back to my test. And yeah. To figure out what's wrong here. Oh, okay. So just give me a few seconds. It seems that I managed not to include all the commits inside of the demo application. So I will rather reload the backup version, which is stored right there on my disk. So let me select the Maven profiles again, which will be OpenShift and WebDriver, for instance, and let me debug the test once again. Using IDE. So let's debug it as a JUnit test. As you can see in the console output, it is deploying my application to OpenShift instance. Depending on the internet connection, it will likely take some time. Yeah, I didn't. That's correct. Thanks a lot. But actually, yeah, I won't be there. So I guess the test will fail. Yeah, it failed. There was the credentials were not right, so let's re-execute the test. So now hopefully I have correct credentials in order to connect to my cartridge. So let's give it a few moments. Meanwhile, I can show you how it actually works. Again, I create a new Maven profile where I include a dependency on Arquillian OpenShift container, and that's the actual configuration. So the information on the page is split into things like namespace, the application name, and the SSH username. If you happen to use SSH ID with a passphrase, you can include it directly in your configuration, or you can load it from the environment variable. And obviously there's a login to the OpenShift instance itself. So it's, yeah, here it is. This is my application, and this time it is deployed on a public cloud instance. This is the URL. It's quite difficult. If you want to connect to the URL, it will be quite difficult because the context path is randomly generated. You can obviously specify name in your deployment method and have a static location here. So again, it doesn't really matter that my test is running on a different JVM and different remote machine. I can basically step over and fill in the application fields right here. So again, it's communicating with a completely different machine at this time. So this is the kind of prerequisite you have to do in order to test on mobile devices. The final step and most important, I guess, the one you have came from for is using drone with mobiles. So basically Selenium and drone supports mobiles. The only thing you have to do, if you think about it, is to select an Android browser. However, the problem is how do you get an environment for using Android from? And that's actually something where drone helps you. It basically allows you to configure in Arquillian XML configuration a path to the Android SDK. You get the possibility to configure the serial ID in case you are using a real device, and you can run using emulators. The next thing you have to do, obviously, create a new profile using the very same concept for Android driver as for the other drivers. You will include a dependency to the dep chain itself. And the extensions will rather connect to a real device, or it will connect to existing and running Android virtual device, or it will start an emulator with the virtual device, or if you happen to specify an AVD name of a device which doesn't exist yet, it will create even the device itself. A nice trick is to use a snapshot devices. I don't know how aware you are of Android SDK, but Android virtual devices allows you to store their memory onto the disk, so it means that it starts much faster on each subsequent usage. Still, you have like two processes: your tests running your JUnit runner, and you have the Android emulator window running somewhere, and you need to these two to be aware of themselves. So the first thing you can think of is like you set an remote address. So you will be using Selenium in a remote mode. You will say, hey, I want to connect to a remote machine. This is where my browser is running. Yes, this is exactly the thing you are going to do. However, who will start the browser on your virtual device, right? Well, drone will do that for you. There's an extension. It's called Arquillian Android Drone extension, so with an extension on top of another extension. This basically is able to install an APK which contains the support for running Selenium on Android devices directly into your emulator or real device. It will also bootstrap things like port forwarding, so once you include this particular extension into your configuration and class path, it will prepare the machine for your tests. So what I will do right here is I will run on emulator first. So let me select another Maven profile, which is Maven profile, which is the Android profile, and I'll be using remote instance because I'll be using emulator at this time. My real device, which is somewhere here, is not yet connected. So let's select remote container profile and let's execute the test again in a debug mode. So it will fetch some dependencies which were included, like that Android extension. And here you can see that the test actually executed the Android device emulator. And let me check if I'm able to show you both things at the same time. Meanwhile, the test is actually installing. It is running WebDriver support on the device. It's getting started. The application was deployed on a separate thread in the application server running in a remote mode on my machine. I specified an IP address when I run the machine, so as the emulator and the application server are running on a single machine, they happen to figure out each other. So this doesn't really differ from the testing on desktop, right? You have an emulator, you can see that the page is a bit more different than it used to be on a desktop browser. That's why you want to test your application. And again, I can go step by step, and here the test itself will fill in the name, and as well as I can continue right now to include email and phone, etc. So again, the very same way how I was using the desktop, I'm using mobiles. So this is quite nice. It means that you don't have to get out of IDE in order to run the Android test in an emulator. The other thing is that the configuration itself is stored and it's in an Arquillian XML file, so that's something you can easily transfer to your continuous integration server. So what I can do now is that I'll be connecting this Android 4.1 device, and I actually don't have to change much in my configuration because I've specified a device ID already in the test, and if such device exists, it will be preferred, so the emulator won't be used. However, what I need to do, I need to switch the application to run on OpenShift. So these two guys will find each other. So let me select an OpenShift profile here, and I will likely spawn and some camera grabbing tool so you can see actually anything, because this is not like, well, it's not a big screen enough. So again, I'll be using my test in a debugging mode, and I'll run a camera grabber. So, oh, that's me. Okay. You can see so far that there is nothing really interesting on the device. However, in the meanwhile, the application is deployed on the OpenShift instance. Yeah. If I unlock the screen, you will see that the WebDriver is started the very same way as it was on the emulator itself. Again, this will take some time. So maybe that's a good time to answer any of your questions so far.
Why did you have to physically connect the phone to the
in order to get the application installed on the mobile phone.
So it's not because you switched to OpenShift.
Yeah.
It's still over the cloud.
Yeah, the application gets deployed to the cloud. The mobile will be using an internet connection to reach that cloud. However, the support for Selenium will be installed using USB connection on the device itself. So the screen now turned white, and you can see that the application, I hope you can see it, that's the application page running on the real device. So I'll try to go through the next debug point, and you should see that it will fill, yeah, here's the keyboard, and actually the name of a new member was filled in. So again, I can continue doing the same for the rest of the test case. So once the test is finished, the application will get undeployed, and I will get a green bar directly in the IDE. What I will do right now is that I will connect another Android device, which is an older Android. It is 234, if I recall correctly. And in my Arquillian XML file, I will basically modify the device ID. So instead of using Galaxy Nexus, I'll be using Motorola D5 Plus. Yeah. And oh, it's okay. Because I'm using an older version, I have to use an older version of the application itself. This is something we want to simplify for you. So the drone Android extension will basically fetch the APK application for you, because it is too complicated to manage these little differences by yourself, and that's no point to doing it so many times. So let me re-execute the test on a different device. I'll be using OpenShift as well in this case. And I will run the test in debug mode. So let me go to the log output. Right now it is installing the APK support for WebDriver on this particular device, and it will likely be started in a few seconds. Doesn't happen so far. Well, okay. So we are waiting. Takes quite a long time for some reason. I didn't sacrifice anything to demo gods, which was likely a very huge mistake. Okay. Doesn't seem to work at this moment. I guess there is still a previous debug bridge instance running on the background, which is preventing me to connect to this device. So what I'm going to show you instead is that you can basically reuse the very same configuration on Jenkins. So Jenkins instance is being started. Meanwhile, I'll start in virtual device. So let's start a virtual device machine here. It will act as an executor for my continuous integration server. So now we are actually waiting for two guys to finish their work. Okay, let me terminate the test. It's already terminated. Yeah, there was an error. Okay, it's already terminated. So let's for a moment until Jenkins gets started. For some reason it should be started at this moment already. The idea here is that I will have a metrics-based project which will be using Maven profiles I've defined in order to execute on both desktop and mobile devices. However, until Jenkins gets started, there's no much I can show you, unfortunately. So let me try to reconnect the device again, and hopefully we'll do something this time. So I'm connecting the old Android device and I'm debugging the test right here. So let's go back to the test itself. As I was forced to rewind the application to the last step, you can see a few modifications I have done here. I've modified the test to avoid clicking on the elements. I create a method which basically encapsulates all the information from Selenium right here. So instead of trying to figure out what are the particular elements on the test in the test application, I basically encapsulate everything into a single unit I can reuse in the other tests. So this is very good pattern here, and you can see here that my test includes an if element which basically tries to figure out if the test itself is running on an Android device, and if so, it uses a bit different workflow or test flow. And the example I would like you to show you is using the old device, because with the old device it should fail, and you will see that the test for determining switching from a desktop environment to the mobile environment is actually broken. So the modernizer framework I'm using is not used correctly in this case. The JUnit runner actually failed, so I can't show you that at this moment, and for some reason I can't actually show you Jenkins as well. So We have a lot of time left, so I will restart the Jenkins. And maybe it will connect this time. So this is the conclusion of the presentation, which basically says what we've done. Unfortunately, some of the stuff I wanted to show you is not working so far at this moment, so it's up to you to decide if nothing really prevents you to run your test in continuous integration environment. As you can see on this demo, the continuous integration environment itself prevents me to do so. So this is basically something I haven't counted with. The main idea here is that you can encapsulate all the things you need to specify into a Maven profiles. So then you can select these Maven profiles either in your IDE or on a command line environment. This makes you able to use the same configuration in the IDE and continuous integration server as a first advantage. The other advantage is actually that you can use an integration server running in a matrix job mode to run all the profiles separately. So on a continuous integration machine, you will get a full test coverage. Let's give Jenkins a try. Oh, here it is. Okay, awesome. So this is basically the configuration of my verification job. As you can see here, it doesn't really do much. It basically gets a repository of a demo application. It selects a branch. And here it is, the most important part. Basically, I have a browser profile access here where I specify two values. So I've selected the Firefox and Android driver. And as you can see, the test execution, there is no such thing like running an Android Jenkins plugin. You basically, the only thing you have to do is execute Maven. And obviously my configuration on the machine I'm using to show you the presentation and the node started in KVM differs a bit. So here I will make it bigger. Here I'm actually using a possibility to override configuration of Arquillian XML using a few system properties. So basically I'm just overriding a path to Android SDK. This is something you can do on your continuous integration server once for all nodes. So you don't have to mess with it in every test. You can also expose an Android home system environment variable on Oreo nodes by Jenkins, and then you won't have to specify anything at all, anything like that at all. I'm really in a doubt if I should try to execute this, as nothing is working correctly at this moment. So this is basically a console output is likely the same as it doesn't really make much sense to go through it. Rather, let me show you the test results. You can see here that the test was executed. This is actually for the web driver, so it was executed on Firefox. And here is an Android device, and the very same test was executed on Android. Here it makes more sense to check a log, and we can search for an Android. And you can see in the logged output that the Arquillian actually started an Android SDK. It was searching for the serial ID, but no such device was connected because it's connected to the other machine right here. And so it used emulator in order to execute the test. I will give it a try. So let me execute the test. Here I'm using, because I have a single executor on my machine, I'm using a sequence mode, so it will run the Android test first, and then when finished it will return back to the desktop testing. So you can see here on the output that actually the managed container which I'm using at this case was started. Now it is waiting for the emulator to be started. It is using an AVD name I specified in Arquillian XML configuration. I've already executed this test before, so the IVD already exists. So it should be connected quite quickly. Yeah, you can see that the Android SDK support is just being installed right there. And hopefully we'll get the execution results quite soon. Maybe you are wondering what you can actually do apart from running your tests based on Selenium using this Arquillian Android extension. Selenium allows you to make screenshot as well. Oh yeah, as I said, it's not working. Selenium allows you to take screenshot of your application, so you can get more information what's actually going on even if running on continuous integration server. And the other possibility we have here in a drone ecosystem, I can show you in the extension code itself, is that we make you able to modify the existing instance just by injecting its controller into the test itself. And then you can, for instance, set up forwarding, port forwarding, or install an application on your own. So here we can see another kind of unit test. You can see here that what I'm doing is just a smoke test. Basically, I injected a controller of an Android device directly into a JUnit test, and I'm able to install a package. If I would use another third-party tool like Monkey Runner, I can basically use the already started instance and use Monkey Runner to connect to it and browse the native application itself. So that was for Android. I haven't brought an Apple machine here, which was maybe the reason why it was not working. The idea is that we have a very similar extension for for iPhones. So basically, if you want to test your application on iOS, the only thing you need to do is to create a new profile, which basically says that browser capabilities you want to get is an iPhone or iPad or whatever these guys are doing at this moment, and you have to include an dependency to to Arquillian iOS extension, and that way you can reuse your test even on iOS. So we get a bit more farther on this slide. We were able to move to continuous integration environment. Just for the sake of sanity, if it failed on Android, yeah, we can see that it was working fine on the desktop browser. So the reason being is that I did a few rebase commits and I forgot to push the original state of the application, I guess. But that's basically the same reason why it's not working correctly on my other mobile phone. So this was a short presentation about using Arquillian together with Android. If you are still interested in how it can be used, you can follow our arquillian.org page where you get a lot of tutorials. I'll be trying to revamp this presentation into tutorial as well. So apart from having possibility to go through the test application plus these slides, there will be a kind of document which makes you able to go through the steps done here. You can obviously follow us on Twitter, or Facebook or even Google+. And here's another space for your questions. Any questions so far? Okay. Thank you very much for being there.